All right. Well, why don't we, looks like we've got Elizabeth. Okay, good. Fantastic. Okay. Well, I think that we'll probably have some people signing on a little bit late, which is okay. I'll just have to navigate that a little bit. So this is our second webinar together, and we are, just to put us back into the same place, we are in the month of the root. We are now entering the third week of the root chakra. And so what I wanted to do in this webinar is a little bit of a hybrid model here. I wanted to open it up with some discussion and check-in and feedback. And then I wanted to go through some of the root topics to kind of do a recap and a summary and kind of looking above and say like, okay, these are the things that we're moving through. And then to launch what we're going to be talking about this week, which is food and lifestyle. Which, and you know, this is really an interesting blend of all of you, because some of you are even food and spirit practitioners, so you've gone through this in depth. And then some of you are not food and spirit practitioners, and so your knowledge of how I approach the systems is a bit different, right? And so it's a matter of we're needing to meet everybody where they're at, which is good. And I think that having a partner, you know, and just really getting new eyes into this work is really a gift. And so as I was putting together the partners, I was thinking about that. So let's see, we've got a couple of people. Jane just signed on. So we've got Jane. Let me just make sure that she is co-host as well. Okay. So why don't we start, before we get into our check-in, let us all, that's why I just kind of announced where we are in the process, because that helps us to get rooted. So let's do a really simple grounding activity. And I was asking if anybody wanted to volunteer to lead us through. Didn't have anybody volunteer, but if you're still open to it, I'm open to you just doing that kind of last minute. But I'll also just walk you through something that I do fairly quickly. So let me just see here. I think we've got Gloria. You know, grounding doesn't have to be a whole involved process. I do think that the more that we can come into our physical body, the sooner we can do it, the quicker, and the more that we exercise that, the better. So I was thinking that all of us can do that together as we're here, and as we kind of go through this process of all being extremely present, tuning in, listening in, and just really sitting within our bodies. So one of the first things that I like to do is simply to, you can close your eyes if you want. Sometimes it's easier because you can put your awareness in certain places, whereas if you have your eyes open, your awareness starts to go in other directions. So what I like to do, and I often do this before I see clients, Audrey was asking, you know, what do you do if you're an empath and you're highly sensitive and you kind of take on people's stuff, you feel people's emotions? For the reason of seeing people clinically, one of the things I like to do is grounding. Or if I'm going into a very stressful situation where I know that I might be rocked a little bit, I like to do a very quick grounding exercise. And so all I like to do is just kind of close my eyes, and this just takes seconds. And I focus on my feet. Because one of the first things that happens when we're ungrounded is we forget we have legs. We forget we have feet. We forget that we are connected to the earth. So just to close your eyes and to wiggle your toes. Really simple. Really simple. Just feel the entire sole of your foot. Both of them. One at a time if you want. You can do them simultaneously. Wiggling the toes, moving around on the ball of your foot, which is the upper half of your foot. Rocking your feet back into your heel area. And obviously we can't see this for each other. We just have to feel it. Feeling all sides of your feet. And one of the things I love to do as much as I can is I do like to go barefoot or just wear socks, especially if I'm in my house. And even when guests come to our house, I ask them to remove their shoes. That's more from a toxicity perspective, but I do think it brings us into this place of groundedness, right? So just check in. You know, do you feel differently? Just even tuning into your feet. This is just one part of your body, but bringing your awareness down deep into the part that you're most connected to the earth, to the ground, or to the floor, whatever it is, can make a very noticeable difference. And of course, if we were all outside doing this, it would have a different resonance. And this is the science of earthing. It's called earthing. Sometimes it's called grounding. If you really feel like you're out of sorts, you're feeling fragmented or dissociated, one of the best things to do is if you can just go out and lay on the ground, lay on a grassy knoll, and just kind of everything, your arms, your back, and just to lay out completely. So even more than your feet if you can. But if you're not in that situation, one of the quick things that you can do is just focus on your feet. So yeah, you can open your eyes. Again, that only takes seconds. And the more that you do it, the more that you do any of these activities, the more that your consciousness, your awareness goes there. So then you just start doing it automatically. And the science even shows that when we do something repeatedly, it has, even for small amounts of time, it has greater benefit than just doing it weekend warrior style, where you do a massive grounding activity, like you go hiking and then you don't do anything for the rest of the week. So small bits of grounding throughout the week, throughout the day. And one of the best times to do it is in the morning, because we are very ungrounded when we wake up. Part of us is kind of in that la-la land of sleep consciousness and the unconscious, and we're making our way back to the body. Okay. All right, we've got Alma and Lynn. I'm just seeing other people that have just signed on. So let me just pause there. Any comments about grounding in general? Did you want to share anything about your grounding practice, if you have one, or if it's something that you've been doing, but then you kind of stopped doing, and just any comments about grounding that anybody wants to share? You can just unmute yourself. You should have an unmute button and you can just speak, or you can raise your hand and I believe I can unmute you as well. Any comments about grounding? Shelley?
Yeah, I try to do meditation as much as I can. I mean, I shoot for every day, but oftentimes that doesn't happen. But in the morning,
yeah,
usually first thing in the morning. And another thing I find that is really grounding for me, I like to do some high intensity cardio, which is fun and I love it. But like a way more grounding thing that I find essential for me is like weights, like heavy, not crazy cardio thing, but just like heavy. They don't have to be heavy weights, but just working with that at a slower pace, and it's literally more grounding. And I try to do that a couple of times a week. So I find
that makes really good sense, doesn't it? From the aspect of the root and the root chakra being heavy, grounded, down to earth. It's like an anchor, like tossing an anchor over the boat and it going down to the bottom of the ocean, kind of that feeling. And so weights, that really makes sense. I like that a lot, actually. Please.
No, that's what I was gonna say.
I like that.
Really helpful.
Yeah. And I wonder how many of you have worked with different types of physical activities to see what really puts you in your body. I like that you mentioned the high intensity interval training, which is really good. It's good for variety, kind of shaking things up a bit.
Yeah. Well, I go to spin classes, so it's so much fun. I love it, but it's crazy because it's loud music, it's fast, it's hard, it's fun. It's so much fun, but it's not grounding at all.
Not grounding, yeah.
So it's a nice balance to have that. The weights. So
let's ask all of you. I'm even reflecting on, maybe some of you are thinking like, what does it feel if I'm actually grounded? We're talking about a means to feel heavy and in the body. But how do you know if you actually feel grounded? And I'm curious if anybody wants to talk about, like, maybe you don't know if you feel grounded or not. Like, what is this whole term grounding? And like, so we're talking about physical activity, focusing on the feet. But does anybody want to share kind of the feeling of what it feels like to be grounded versus not? Carol, you've got your hand up. So let me, okay, you should be unmuted.
Hello.
Hi, Carol.
So I will tell you that I am the least grounded I have ever been in my life right now. There have been times when I felt grounded when I finished particular, I guess phases in my life, but right now I am so far away from the ground that I don't even know if I knew what would happen if my feet touched at this point. But I believe that this is just something that it's a growing phase maybe. And when I started this program again, I haven't done anything with you in a while. I was like, wow, you really need this. And so I look forward to it. And that's my honest truth. I have been grounded. There have been times when I felt completely grounded and like my feet were firmly planted in the ground and I was just ready for anything. And now I am so far off the ground.
Hey, Carol, thank you for that honest share. And I'm sure that some of us feel that as well. Some of you were talking about just having a lot of intensity in your lives lately, and stress can pull us up and out, right? Because it's like survival and we kind of move up and out. So I'm curious, Carol, if you might describe, what does it feel like to not be grounded then? Because you obviously have had the contrast. You know what it feels like to be on the ground and feeling that. So when you say that you don't feel that now, how does that feel in your body? Where are you with that sensation?
Well, I myself being like a person who's always been in control of my situation, both at work and at home, I'm not in control of any of it right now. And I've come to a point where I just accept that. But so I feel like the decisions that are now, like things that are happening are no longer in the realm of my area of control. My job is crazy. I'm not at all where I imagined I would be at 55 years old. And I just am kind of going with the flow, even though we're not in the flow. I'm kind of going with that. And I believe that everything I've done up till now is leading me to this place. I just really wish I knew where it was at this particular time. I've been in a point where I felt, validated, and I knew that my job was the right place for me at the right time. And I was doing the right thing with the right people. And this is a big departure for me. And there was a great deal of personal acceptance that allowed me to stop freaking out about it and just say, you know what, you're just going to have to go with it and see where it leads. And it was really very serendipitous that this all started, because it was probably middle of May that I realized this isn't your choices anymore. Just deal with it and make the best of every day. So, there are a lot of small little signs that show me on a daily basis that regardless of what I may or may not believe at that time, that is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I am moving towards something better, but I just have to take the ride.
Thank you. Does anybody want to respond to what Carol just said? Anybody feel this themselves, or they might have some words that came to them just more intuitively as far as something that she said that you felt like you had a response for? Certain words that she mentioned? Anybody?
So, hi, Janice, Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Carol. Listening to you, I was really like, wow, that's amazing, just to be able to sit with that and go with that situation that you're in. I find that I do completely the opposite, which is I try to rein it in and put as many boundaries around it as I can and get some containment. And for me, so I was really listening to that and thinking, oh, wow, maybe there's something in here around, but you can stay grounded with your feet on the ground at the same time as you have the flexibility to flow along with what's happening and trust that that's going to take you where you need to be, rather than trying to engineer it to go where you feel you kind of may want to go, but actually still don't really know where you're going. So I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's kind of like I was feeling myself thinking, oh, I'll do exactly the opposite. Maybe that's not, maybe playing with the opposite would be better than trying to do the same thing all the time, which is get more boundaries around it, because that doesn't really seem to work. So it works to a certain extent, but there's always a bit about not being able to, you can't control the other people who are driving things. So thank you. It's really, really nice to hear that.
Carol, any thoughts on what Jane just mentioned?
No, I thank you very much. I should probably, I don't, obviously we all don't know each other, but I've worked through some other experiences with Deanna, and I used to be the manager of an emergency department, and I spent 39 years at the bedside, and
Yeah.
I was the person who directed everything. Not 39 years, only 35 years. And I changed my path of my career. And after I did that, my employer changed my job. So I keep trying to jump back into my old role. And it was last week, I got an automatic reply on one of my attempts that said, stop applying for this job because you're not going to be considered for it.
Oh, gosh.
It's like, well, that is just about the most honest response ever. And I just said, okay, here we go. You just got your answer. You do not get off, Carol. This is where you're supposed to be. Just see what's next.
Yeah.
So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Good. You know, some of the words that I was writing down just more intuitively as Carol was speaking to, and thank you, Jane, for weighing in and giving some insight. I think it's so important to acknowledge any kind of impulse or intuition that we get as somebody speaking, like there might be something there, some healing. Carol, and this is speaking to everybody, we're not doing a session based on Carol's feedback per se, other than I'm thinking that probably some of us can tap into some of that feeling that she's describing. So one of the things that she mentioned was feeling out of control, needing to accept. Here, let me just make sure that everybody can put themselves, there we go. So feeling out of control, needing to be in a place and having that reconciliation in one's mind. Jane was talking about boundaries, containment. What I was sensing from Carol's second share was this idea of redefining who we are. And when we have a root identity for so long, 35 years of doing a certain thing, even if it's 5 years doing a certain thing, sometimes that letting go process, like we've been so rooted into it that to untangle ourselves from it and to redefine who we are it puts us in that role of having to resculpt our identity. And that really does bring out a lot of the root, right? And so just as a fun activity, one of the things that I get intuitively whenever we're in that mode is just doing a quick kind of like just writing out adjectives, different words about the feelings that you want in your life, right? This is not nouns. These are just adjectives, feeling words that you're looking for as part of this redefinition process. So that's just an idea. And when we feel out of control, I think what Carol was saying initially about being out of control, not feeling earthed, in those times when we don't feel in control and we don't feel earthed, bringing in some of the root tools like structure, regimen, rules, creating a container. Jane, I think you mentioned the word containment, kind of employing some of the root tools, some of the benefits of the root in order to kind of harness that feeling and to give us that sense of safety, maybe not control per se, but safety. It brings us back into that sacred womb-like container. All right. So I would like to just also, I put this on the Facebook page, and I'm kind of curious how it's going on the Facebook page. We're going to talk about that in a second with some feedback. Some of you have noted some shifts. I think, Kelly, you had stated some things. There might have been, you know, we're still kind of up and moving, and it's interesting that we're in the root, and some of us are really aiming to get planted into this course, into the material, and to really be present for everything that's circulating, right? So would anybody just like to do a general check-in? And this might be something that, you know, how was it to work with your partner? Was there something during that first week talking about safety, tribe, and survival? Was there something about last week, you know, just even thinking of the body? So I don't know, just opening a space here for us to do any kind of share as it relates to your root and your own process. And I'm getting a chat here. Barbie is saying, I feel a big difference when I ride a horse that is barefooted and one that has shoes. Well, that's interesting. That's very interesting. So not even our feet, but in this case, an animal that we might be riding and how that feels. Barbie, feel free if you want to unmute yourself and talk a little bit about that too. I have a good friend who's a farrier.
Yeah, so this was just going back in the last chat you were just speaking about being grounded. And I was listening to the speakers talk about control. And I have to say that I feel more in control when I'm sitting in a saddle and sitting on a horse that has shoes. It's heavy. It's a heavier feeling, and I have control. But then when the horse is barefooted, and it's a different, lighter feeling, and I ride bareback, bitless, and it's a free feeling. Total. I feel weightless. And I don't feel like, I don't feel nervous. I don't feel like I need to be in control. But we're grounded. We're more grounded. So it's just unique. I just wanted to share that. There is a total difference for me, riding barefooted or a horse with shoes.
That is fascinating. And it's kind of counter to what we might think, right? We might think that, as we were talking about with Shelley, with weights, feeling heavier, feeling in our body. Mm-hmm. Now, this might tie in to if we have an overactive root or an underactive root.
Right, exactly.
Right? If we're kind of underactive, we might need some heaviness.
Right.
We might actually need something a little bit more grounding. Whereas if we are overactive, we might need something a little bit more freeing to kind of put us in balance.
And when I go to the barn, I decide, what am I going to do? We go, oh, it's a barefoot day, or I'm going to saddle today. Yeah, I can feel the difference, and I can feel the difference in myself, how I'm approaching it already. So
interesting.
I just wanted to share that.
That is such a great metaphor for all of us, and it really does take us into that place of checking in. Like Shelley was talking about her physical activity, and for you, Barbie, you know, really reflecting on your horseback riding.
Right.
And then for Carol, her job.
Her job.
Control, right? And so there's a barometer here. There's a spectrum. And so it's kind of like checking in every day, grounding, checking in, and kind of seeing, you know, what is your earth element telling you? Do you need a little bit more? And I do think, as people know from working with me through the Food and Spirit practitioner training, I do think that certain people constitutionally are born to just need a little bit more grounding, you know, just from a physical perspective. Some people are just very sensitive upon birth, and that might be from transgenerational effects. That might be from certain imprints that are epigenetic. And then others of us, or even as an overlay onto that constitution, we might have experiences that change how grounded we are. We might have a lot of stress in our lives that brings us out of our body or into our body. You know, we all respond. It's such a personalized process. So the three of you and how you just weighed in very unique ways, we can see how it's really a spectrum, right? There's no one way to do anything. It's like tuning into where your body is in that moment.
And I think it goes for us as humans, what what footwear are you going to wear? Are you going to put boots on? Are you going to put moccasins on? Or are you going to wear, sandals? Or, that's grounding. For me, it is. It says, how are you going to feel to what appointment where you're going, to what attire you're going to wear? And it starts at your feet, right? Well, that's going to match your outfit.
Yes, 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 yes. And even if we drill into the body just a little bit more here, since we're focused on the feet and grounding, the structure of your foot.
Right.
People have more wide feet, less of an arch.
Mm-hmm.
To really even look at that is a small microcosm potentially into how you earth and how you ground. Right?
Right.
I love that you're bringing up this idea of shoes and how you feel, and to feel that out. Is it sandals or boots or
Right.
barefoot or gym shoes? And that can really change how we feel in the rest of the body. You talk to a reflexologist or to physical therapists who really work with the feet, and how it really primes the rest of the body's experience, how we get signals from the earth, right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. How about another check-in? Anybody want to comment further on any changes? I mean, even if you feel like you've been really frenetic, or maybe there has been a shift. I just want to, again, hold space for anybody that would like to share. And if not, that's okay. You can raise your hand if you want, or you can just unmute yourself.
Anna.
Yes. Oh, Marcel, hi.
Hi. So I had an interesting experience yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I have a daughter that's leaving, and she's going on a mission, and my parents yesterday just decided to come and visit, and that was like, whoa, they're kind of wishy-washy with always, if they're going to come, if they're not. And when I go visit there, it's kind of like only on their terms. And although we have great phone conversations, it's always interesting in person. A little bit of tension sometimes. I feel like I have to be a little bit more on guard. So there were a lot of emotions. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting since we're in the root. And so I really feel like there was a lot of healing there. There were a lot of emotions, sorry. And it was good because it seems like I work so hard to try to have a good relationship, specifically with my dad. And I also thought, okay, that's interesting. It's Father's Day. And anyway, it went really great. So I was having some anxiety before they came. And I was like, okay, you can do this. It's all going to be just fine. And it was good. So I really feel like whatever was shifting, there's some shifting and healing there with my root that way, and safety and really being safe in who I am. And so, and then the other thing with that is I just felt like a lot of family just kind of reached out and was connecting. I visited with my grandma, had talked with my brother, my sister-in-law. So it was kind of cool. It was just like kind of this flood of family, which are really, the roots and my connectedness there, which sometimes I feel very disconnected. And it's not just from me, it's just, we're all spread apart, and, there's differences and things like that. So I thought it was really, it was great.
Yeah, and as we dive into that experience, letting those emotions come up and letting our bodies really feel and be in that space and create that shift, whatever needs to come up and bubble up. Thank you, Markel. There's a lot there, especially with family. We spent the first week really diving into tribe and family. And so much of who we are, our identity, is connected into family. So no wonder we might have more of a charged experience when family comes around again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just to piggyback on to what Markel was talking about with family, any other things with family, tribe that came forth? Any friendships ending, any groups, you're feeling less drawn to, again, to keep in mind that everything is truly relevant in this way. So when things start to happen in the month of the root, looking at our connection to tribe and community and how that starts to shift, if it does, or maybe it starts to solidify. Maybe you feel stronger and more connected to certain people. You feel more of a sense of trust. Tammy.
Yeah, I also had a very interesting day yesterday. My dad is 93. Both my parents are 93. My dad in 2013 had a stroke that left him with some expressive aphasia. And when he and I talk, he has a lot of trouble trying to explain things. But when he and I talk, one, I kind of understand often where he's coming from and can put things together. But yesterday, we had the most clear conversation that I can remember in months. I mean, he can be clear. Like if he gets angry, words will just come right out of his mouth, and he will just sound so lucid and put his thoughts together beautifully. Yesterday, I had sent him a card, and I was talking about all the things we did as a little kid. Well, his memory is a little bit impaired as well. And he said, I thank you for the card. Now, my dad usually says, don't send me a card, because I look at it, go, that's nice, throw that away. But he said, thank you for that card. He said, I didn't remember those things that you were talking about, like playing catch, and him helping me with some projects. But it was just such a gift. We talked a little sports. We talked about childhood things, because he said, I want you to tell me more about these things. It was just probably the loveliest connection I've had with him since 2013. Wow. And then I got on the phone with my mom, and I've been having difficulty reaching them. At 93, if their answering machine is full, they don't use computers. If the answering machine is full, Mom just doesn't sweat that stuff. And so sometimes I've had to call a next door neighbor to say, can you tell them I'm trying to get hold of them for the last week? But I just had the loveliest conversation with my dad. And it just made me feel really solid and complete within myself.
That's beautiful, Tammy. And I'm writing those two words down that you just mentioned, solid and complete. Those are very rooted words, right? And so to have that feeling generated from a conversation, from an interaction with a family member. And so, yeah, how profound that is to have that healing when he's 93, has been through some health challenges, and you coming into that healing space with him.
Yeah, and it seems like he and I always understand. He'll tell me I can't think of the words, and I go, well, just come up with another one. And often he does. Like he was trying to say something about my mother. Their yard always looks very beautiful. And he was trying to say something about my mother still mows the lawn at 93, and it's a big lawn. We call her the Energizer Bunny. And if you ever got to speak with her, she's this very energetic, outgoing person. She's my dad's caretaker. But he was trying to tell me about Mom and all her efforts on the yard. They used to do this. They used to be two peas in a pod and do all this together. Now she does it mostly by herself. And he couldn't come up with what he was trying to tell me. So he said, it looks very beautiful. And in other words, I always tell him, if you can't think of the word, change the sentence to what you think can come out. Now, I do have a speech pathology background, so that kind of helps. But my dad and I always connect, but he's usually complaining that he can't talk. And yesterday, I said, Dad, do you realize how well you have conversed with me? And he said, yes, I do. I'm aware. It was just a beautiful thing.
Wow.
Because I can sometimes talk to him, and I kind of have to dissect what he's trying to tell me. And lots of times, like he said, I said, what are you having for Father's Day? And he said, pizza and cherry pie. Now, normally finding a word like that would be, he'd say ketchuwacha, or something, and he'd go, is that right? No, that's not what was in my head. But yesterday, everything was so clear. It was just such a gift, and I didn't want to let him go. But he finally said, the Texas Rangers are coming on in a few minutes. I want to watch them. So I said, okay, Dad, I love you. And he said, same here. And then I said, what do you mean same here? He said, I love you too. It was just beautiful. It was just I'll hold on to it forever.
Beautiful. Beautiful. My heart feels so expansive just listening to this.
Mine too. And I got off, and I told my husband, and he just said, wow, really? Because my dad can be very challenging to talk to. He'll understand, but then he won't want to speak because he feels like he'll mess up. With me, he doesn't care if he messes up. With my mom, he doesn't care. Anybody else, he cares.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a favorable shift for you with your dad, right?
It was. Yes, it was.
These words, to just, again, play them back to you, all very rooted words, solid, complete awareness, that your dad was aware, you were aware, and you were in that moment of really sharing that sacred space together.
Yes.
Wonderful. Superb. So that was something. So Markel and Tammy having some nice family shifts there. And so, that may happen, maybe not this month for some of you, but maybe it will happen as we move on. And just because we're covering the root in the first month doesn't mean that there won't be a root shift. Sometimes working on the flow or working on a different chakra will essentially bring us back to the root. And as we go on, it'll be like a necklace. We'll be connecting one bead to the next, and yet still revisiting the past so that we can look at the spectrum of of our entire being. Okay? So we're not looking at it in isolation, but in connection. Yay. Thank you, Tammy. Beautiful share. Actually, all these shares are great. They're great in their own way. And they really do show that, many of you are tapping into how you feel and really connecting that into your personal root and what makes you feel rooted and what brings you out of your root, which is really the goal. That's really the goal of the first month, is to get grounded, to really get earthed, and to get settled in. And for some of you who don't feel settled into the course yet, I feel like that's really natural. As we sometimes it takes just a little bit to kind of bring our root down into this place. And for some of us, there might be fear connected into this. There might be huge challenges or huge changes that await us. And so anyway, what I would say here is to see it all as symbolic and to see the deeper meaning in that. Good. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in here. I do want to briefly address, in these live webinars, the goal is to be here for you and to hold space for the whole group, to ask questions, to do some sharing, and then to share some information. So one of the things that Audrey had mentioned was about being an empath. What do you do if you're really sensitive and, struggle with your root? And I do think that being rooted, having a good sense of boundaries, can help with being very empathic, and the two can surely coexist. And that's why for some of us who are in the healing arts, as Carol was describing her position as, overseeing an ER, an emergency room over time, and, just being in this high power, high stress profession, one of the things that we can do to help ourselves is to practice really being rooted, right? And so creating that empathic tone together with the earthy, rooted grounding that we're all very much connected into. And for some of us who are very empathic, we might need a little bit more practice with that. There was another question that I think it could have been Audrey actually, about being born prematurely and about our birth process. And I do want to quickly talk about birth and birth order here, because the root is all about our time in utero, and it's also about our entry into the physical world. So yes, if we're born prematurely or if we had complications at birth, I would say to look at that symbolically as it connects into your root, right? And so if we're born prematurely, there might be, just looking at how you manifest in the world as a result of that experience. I know that for some people that are born prematurely, oftentimes they're put in an incubator or in some kind of enclosed vessel because of their immature immune system. So they're not touched. They don't have all of those rooty signals that we get when we're first born, right? Like being laid upon our mother and being held. And so there can be a sense of, now that doesn't have to be for everybody who's born prematurely, but there could be a sense of not being as rooted and grounded because of coming out into the world in a certain fashion. So there's a nice book. There are various books on birth order and looking at how we are born and going back into our birth story. And, I think it's important to acknowledge those things, but then I also think it's important to not dwell on them so much, because so much of these chakras and systems and parts of us are malleable, they're flexible, and they're not static. So if we are born prematurely, to kind of look at our constitution and how we might have been changed, but also to realize that we're constantly being sculpted. Let's see here. Barbie is putting on chat What the Eyes Reveal by Denny Johnson, Iridology. So there might be, I think it might be good for us to create a book thread. And in fact, one of the things that I wanted to, let me just go to this slide first. I was sensing and wondering, being that we're in the root, wondering if some of you, because we all have different needs in terms of what kind of moves us along in the process. Some of us need more root. Some of us need less root. Some of us don't like a lot of structure. It actually feels very confining. So one of the things I was thinking about this past weekend was whether it would be useful for some of you to have some active activities, maybe in a document. So for the root month, here are some things to focus on for the week. I'm already more or less posting those things on Facebook. And the only thing with Facebook is that, quite honestly, it could be a little bit challenging because there's a flurry. And so sometimes it's harder to keep track of how these things are coming through because it's like a river. And so wherever you're diving into the river is kind of where your attention is. But what I'm thinking is if it would be more helpful to have more root in terms of collecting a lot of these things that I'm capturing on Facebook within a static, more rooted document, so that you can get a sense of, things to write about, things to do, things to talk with your partner about, things to experience, books that might be useful. So let me know, just can some of you just kind of chime in about that? I did make a post today on Facebook, but I'm just curious if you have some creative ideas around that. Because if it would serve all of us in some way to have a certain construct in that way, I want to do it. I want to be there I can do however we want to slice and dice it. It's all possible. So I am looking to meet you where you're at. So what do you think? Anybody have any ideas around the rooted structure and what would help your root? What would help your flow as we start moving through each of these different chakras? Does that sound good to you, what I just mentioned about having a document and having that live on the Facebook page as a static file where people can go into that? You can use that for your partner activities. You can use it for your journaling activities. I think that probably what we might want to do is to have a book thread. you know, and just kind of have some ideas there. So I'm seeing a lot coming through on chat. Lynn, you're saying yes, please. Gloria, yes, please. Alma, I love the idea. Mary Ellen, yes. Lynn, good, we get it. Email too. You know, I've been noticing that email has been a bit bumpy. We've been sending out emails to folks, and I'm not sure if people are getting the emails. So it might be good just to have it live on Facebook, kind of like wherever, you know, that's kind of like our hub, so that there's no missing of anything. Like we'll just put it in a special file. Okay, so it sounds like, yeah, Jane just made a really good point here. Is there a way we can all contribute to the documents? I would love that idea. Okay, so I'll explore ways that we can do that. Great. Yay! All right. And continue to give me some feedback on what we could do here as we move through. I mean, we've got 7 months with each other, so we want to make the most of our time together and be sure that, you know, you're kind of, and what I would say is, at least if you're not a Facebook person, at least go on the Facebook page on Monday to start the week, because that's when I'm posting the theme for the week. So then you can kind of have in your sense of awareness and consciousness, like, oh, this is the food and lifestyle week. I'm going to pay extra special attention now to red colored foods, to protein and these kinds of things, right? So that at least you get a good sense of what we're going to be focused on for the week. Okay. Any other comments?
So I don't know how to put my hand up on this machine, so I just.
Oh, okay. Well, you can also
put your hand up.
Yeah.
Button. So I was just going to say that I agree with you about the flow on the Facebook page, and I see it come through on my regular feed, all mixed in with everything else that comes through. So what I did last week was, and I don't know if this is something that other people do or might be helpful, I just took some time and I literally just went through the Chakra Immersion stuff, and I just ignored all the rest and just went to that particular group, because I get the rainbow one and I get the chakra one and I get the other one, the food and spirit one as well, all 3 of them, and they're all kind of really mixed up, and what we're doing on which one I'm kind of lost. So I decided to just prioritize this one, forget about the other 2 for the moment, just have a quick flick through those. And then yeah, I found that by sitting there and actually working a little bit on the feeds and reading them and staying with the theme of each feed, that really helped me to understand what had been going on, rather than seeing everything again in that really disjointed type of chaotic way that was just thinking, oh God, this is chaotic, you know. So yeah, I don't know if that's an idea that might help other people, or if other people do the same or have some other ideas about how to manage that volume that might put some people off. So
it's a good idea, Jane. And I noticed that some people do that. I have somebody in another group who will just stay on the page and just kind of go through all the posts.
You can see, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like just acknowledge them all and then kind of work through activities and do it that way. Unfortunately, on Facebook, you can't create a static post, except if it's an announcement. But then you start getting all these announcements, and it's like, what is the true announcement here? So I think the way to do it, Heather and I were looking this morning, and there's a way to have a file document. And what we did in the Rainbow Foods and Supplement group was we had people adding to the document, kind of as we did have a book thread, which was great. It was really robust.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's, I think we can do that, the same exact thing. But I would like to have everything housed on the Facebook page, because then we all know where to go, and then we don't get emails that are lost, and we don't have to log into a separate dashboard. It's just like it's all in one place.
I suppose my idea was just with the email, just like on a Monday, because I find Facebook actually doesn't show you everything. Like I have to go, even if I do what Jane says, go to the group. Yeah. I'll have to tell Facebook to show me, say, like the latest. Otherwise, it just shows me what it thinks is relevant. So it might even not show me even all the posts. It might just show me posts that somebody I'm connected to have answered. So so that's why, like, I'm just like, I find I'm a bit frustrated with Facebook, the way they've even changed the algorithms in the groups, because I'm 100% convinced that they still tell you what they show you even in the groups, what they think you should be looking at. not what's everything that's there. And, you know, the more groups you're in or the more different things you have, like, you know, there's only so much space in your feed, or even in the group space, depending on the group size, that, you know, so that's why I felt it's a bit limiting. And also, I suppose personally, because my life has been so crazy for the last little while, that if I'd had like some prompts on the Monday, even if I wasn't able to engage in the page for a couple of days because life is just so overwhelming, then just knowing, you know, having somewhere else to get those prompts to hold the intentions for the week would be really useful. It's just, I mean, that's just me, because my life has just been mad for 2 weeks. So, and like I've been traveling and doing all sorts of stuff. So there's only so much I can take in. And then just like being able to have the intention. I haven't even been able to go near a journal because there is no structure to what I should be writing in it or where I should be, you know, so like it feels very ungrounding for me to even get planted into the whole thing, if that makes sense.
That's good feedback, Lynn. And so what I will do is on the static elements of the Facebook page, so you don't have to search for a post. All you have to do is go to the files, right? And just look at the document that would summarize what you'd be getting. And what's
the focus for the week? That's what you're talking about, right?
Well, actually, I'm going to do it. My idea is to do it for the month, because everybody's kind of in their own rhythm, and some people may want to do some week 3 things and week 2, or just they might want to have a more extensive outlook. So you can curtail and kind of look at how you want to look at the weeks. But I think what I'm going to do is vision it out for the month and then have like the root document for the whole month. And so then I'll have it broken out into the 4 weeks, and then I'll have, you know, we can add to the books, but we'll have that one unifying document that lives there so that everybody can contribute. And
there's a way you could send us that in an email once.
But then everybody can't contribute. If we have it on the page, then everybody can add to the document.
It's just like, maybe just like that outline, or, you know, with the whatever journal prompts or whatever access you have, that could just be like shoved out once. If you get it, if that's the access you get it, then that's grand. And then it still lives on the Facebook page that we could add to whatever. I don't know. I know it's more work for you guys, but like it just, and you know, it still can disappear in your email inbox.
Well, that's the thing. You have to log into something, right?
Save things. You can have folders in your inbox, and then you can. That's what I've done, say, with Whole Detox in the past. I just created a Whole Detox folder, for example, when we had the emails, and then I just put them all there, and then they all live there, and they all live there forever. So, like, that's really handy. So that's one way of doing it, like for oneself. You know, that's what I've said people to do in email courses and stuff as well. Like you can do a folder in your own inbox and you just park them there, or, you know, you can download stuff to your computer, but, you know, that way. So that's another way. I just find, like, I like Facebook, but I'm so frustrated with it that it doesn't give you like access to everything that you're actually potentially have access to, because they just decide what they think you should be looking at, not what's actually there. So that's something I've noticed probably over the past few years. It wasn't like that 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
that's something that's changed in the last couple of years. Yeah, so just something to be aware of.
Yeah, no, but we've had email issues too. We have a certain email service, and so many people aren't getting their emails, and then we have to follow up. I think it's so many of the different, but we'll work it out. Well, Heather and I will talk behind the scenes, but I think what I can do for all of you is at least come up with this document, have it a bit more structured into certain journaling activities. And again, what I'm doing is making a post every week, and that's our theme for the week, right? And so you can journal on any aspect of that, but I can also give you some ideas, and I'm definitely happy to do that. We can do that for sure.
Yeah, perfect.
Alrighty. Oh my goodness. Talk about root and boundaries and time. What I'd like to do is go through some material. I'm just looking at the clock here. It's 1:54, so basically like 5 minutes. But let me just go through some information because I want to get us ready for this food and lifestyle week, which I think is a big week for many of you. You know, it's not that every week isn't a big week, but I do think that, you know, we're going to be meeting every other week. And so this is a week that we could dive into this a little bit more. All right. So let's just revisit the root themes, right? First week, safety, survival, tribe. And by the way, I'll do these retroactive weekly in the document that I have for the root. I will do this retroactive. So I will go back to week 1 and give you something. So if you do want to go back and kind of work with these different themes that we had, safety, survival, tribe was week 1, adrenals, bones, and blood was week 2, to really get into that space too. Some of you have seen this before and some of you have not. So this is what I call the root matrix. And I talk about the root is very physical, but then there are energetic aspects or feeling or things that aren't as tangible. And so what we spent some time on for the first 2 weeks was life and body. So survival, structure, strength, protection, tribe, identity. That's kind of the circuit if we look at this in a very horizontal way. And then body, you know, focus on adrenals, bones, blood, muscle, skin, genes, our immune system. And so now we go below that, and what we're going to focus on this week is all things food, right? And looking at adaptogens, because adaptogens work with our immune system to help us work better with our environment. Minerals, part of our structure. And the other side of minerals is metals. So kind of having this dynamic tension between things like heavy metals, like mercury or lead or cadmium, any number of different metals, interacting with minerals. What's really interesting from the literature is that when we have high levels of minerals in the body, it drives down the metals. When we have high metals in the body, it can drive down the minerals. So, and they're heavy, right? What do we call them? Heavy metals. They are the charge on those components, you know, they are what make up our bone, our skin, our hair. A lot of mineral components to our physical structure. And really and truly, what revs our whole body and being and system is minerals. Many of them are used. I mean, look at magnesium, 300 different reactions in the body. A lot of these minerals are used as cofactors. So our physical structure, enzymes, typically work because we have a mineral that is a catalyst in that process. I do want to talk about protein as the macronutrient. Protein is very grounding. I believe Audrey was asking on the page today about meat, red meat, just heavy proteins in general, and how this might be beneficial for certain people. And what I'd like you to do this week is really focus on how different proteins make you feel. And that kind of depends on which protein sources you choose to eat. You know, some of you have certain boundaries or limitations around what proteins you eat, and that's fine too. So what I would say is, let's just say that you are a vegan or vegetarian where you eat legumes as your primary protein source. Trying out different beans. How does a kidney bean differ from a garbanzo bean, from a cannellini or any black bean? You know, how do these different foods that are high in protein make you feel after you eat? And also, you know, this whole idea of what I have observed clinically is that, and I write about this in my books as well, is how sometimes when we don't feel grounded, we just eat. And sometimes that eating on automatic pilot is connected to that feeling of not being firmly connected and grounded. And eating does a good job of, you know, bringing us back. You know, the anchor is our belly. You know, it gets full with food. It makes us feel heavy. It brings us into the moment. So let's explore protein this week. You can explore any number of these different things. The other things that I have here are lycopene, which is one of the red phytonutrients that's really rich in red colored foods. Taking a personalized approach. I do think that one of the things that we're seeing in nutrition these days is looking at genes and matching them to food and different things that we should be doing from a nutritional standpoint. So we call that personalized nutrition. We also might call it nutrigenomics. I happen to be involved in a clinical trial on this very topic, and it's really fascinating because I believe it's going to get away from kind of the noise and the confusion of so many clinical trials out there where we see a conflict or we see very disparate results. We see that one trial showed one thing, and then when it was studied again, we see something else. And so I do think that as we bring genomics into, you know, a person's physiology, in this clinical trial that I'm working on, we're not only looking at genes, we're looking at one's environment, one's lab biomarkers, one's preferences. It's actually quite robust. And all of those things really make up the whole of a personalized response to eating. Then there's also anti-inflammatories, so things that quell inflammation in the body, and that might be a nutrient, it might be a vitamin, a mineral, or it could also be an herb or a botanical or a plant. So if we're thinking of circuits here and thinking of how we look at each of these as a ribbon, as a horizontal, kind of a necklace of different connection, the one that we'll be focused on this week is surely this one on food. So let's see how we feel with all of that, and to really be paying attention to how different foods feel in our bodies. You know, do we get grounded from eating certain things more than others? I know for me personally, just even this past weekend, we went to a Greek restaurant, and I feel like if I'm in a Greek restaurant, I'm going to eat really Greek food. So I had lamb, I had kebabs, you know, and I felt so grounded. It was like, you know, whereas if I have something that's a little bit more high in carbohydrate, I do have more legumes, I don't feel as grounded. And I'm a person that happens to need, at certain times, I need a little bit more grounding than others. So using heavier protein sources might be well serving of that sense of groundedness in my body, right? That sensation that I might feel. So let's explore that this week. So I did want to mention that. I'm just going to do about another 5 minutes. So if you can stay on, fine, that would be great. But I just want to be sure I can cover a couple more things here. The other thing that I want us to really reflect on, and again, some of you have studied with me before and some of you haven't. And I talk about this in whole detox. So how do you know if you have a healthy root? How do you know if you have an unhealthy, imbalanced root? And who do you look to as like an example of somebody who's very grounded? So somebody who's very present, somebody who can survive adequately and feels comfortable with that means of survival. And that doesn't mean you have to make a certain income. It could be somebody who actually doesn't make a lot of material wealth, but they survive adequately. They feel very present. They feel very centered. They feel good in who they are. Trust, being trustworthy as well as trusting others. That's kind of a two-part scenario. Acceptance, accepting themselves, physical bodies. You know, just even for myself and knowing with other people, if we have kind of this, you know, I've lived for a long time in the yoga community and in various spiritual communities. And one thing that I've noticed is that there's almost like this rejection of the physical. It's kind of like, oh, that's less evolved. That's less evolved. I need to move into the spiritual because, you know, that's what I'm about. I'm really a non-physical being. And so then there's this rejection of the earth place and the fact that we are in a physical body and meeting with a lot of challenges. So really to look at how we accept being in body. And one of my spiritual intuitive teachers from years and years ago, she would always say that the people who are most grounded, who are most rooted, there is this connection to manifestation because we are in a physical world with certain laws, right? And so just looking at how we feel about being physical, being in a physical body, how we feel about our bodies. Do we have boundaries with these bodies? And feeling that we have a right to exist. So I also have here on the other side, and I've been speaking to these already as I've been going through the healthy. And again, this is a short list. In Whole Detox, I have a long list of all the things that would suggest being ungrounded or unrooted, and a long list of things that would denote being more rooted. So that involves family, tribe, survival issues. And even though on the body part and really reflecting on that week, there's much more that goes into the body in the root, more than just the 3 things that I mentioned. What I was feeling for this course too is not to overwhelm. I think that my tendency when I'm lecturing, I give a lot of, and then it's like a deluge, you know, I guess because Jeff Bland has been mentored to me, you know, I kind of get used to a certain way to deliver. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't know if people retain. So, and I'm really into retention now. I'm really into like making sure that people are interacting, experiencing. To me, that's more important than just the information. And so even though I focused on just three things with the root in the body, there actually is much more. So it's up to you if you'd like to explore some of these things. And when I put in the root document, I will list these out. And thinking about having a discussion with maybe one of these. And you can do that. One of the ways that I've done this, and I even do it now as part of my own growing and enrichment, is if I'm having an issue with a body part, I put a pillow across from me. I sit cross-legged on the ground. I do this a lot with, I have these body-mind conversations where I imagine my mind and then I imagine my body. And I go and sit in both places, and I have a dialogue with the other from that viewpoint, wherever I'm sitting. And I've known other people that use this by way of visualization, journaling, and saying, you know what, I'm having an issue with my immune system. I've got all these allergy problems. Every spring, I have this whole host of different things that happen with me. I remember one conversation I had was with my immune system. I actually saw my immune system, and I started to visualize my immune system imprint and started to dialogue with it like a person and to tap into the intelligence of the immune system. And everybody has their own imprint, right? My imprint is not going to be the same as yours. So you might want to have some fun with that too, in terms of creating some dialogue or journaling to get you going with the different body parts. I actually really like doing this. It's fun to do. And if you're more of a written person, you might want to write it out like a dialogue. I mean, if you think of, there's a great series of books by Neil Donald Walsh, and they're called Conversations with God. It was all done through pen and paper, right? He was just like having this conversation and dialogue and just writing it out. And then the physiological functions, enzymes, you know, and how things are catalyzed within our body, how we excrete, how we survive, how we have stress, fight or flight, genomic. I mean, this is like such the genomic era. We live in root times right now. It's really, you know, when in the 90s, you know, there were other types of different fluxes of chakra themes coming out. But right now, we are living in very rooted times, like very, so many things need to be healed from the root perspective. And I think a lot of that got started when, even dietarily, when we started to see how certain dietary approaches became very popular, like the Atkins approach, like high protein and paleo, how that all came up. A lot of issues with safety, survival in countries. You know, just at a collective level, there's just a lot of root going on right now. So the foods and supplements, and I'll list these on your weekly sheet in terms of, you know, getting into these and exploring. And again, what I would say is I don't want you to get overwhelmed. I want you to look at this list and say, hey, Deanna, you know what calls me here is minerals. I really want to get into minerals, because you can't do them all extremely well, right? And so to use your sense of instinct and bodily awareness to say, here's where I need to go, and to use a similar question for any one of these that you'd like to dive into. So you'll have a similar question as a group, but you can apply it in different ways. For some of you, you might be drawn to protein. For some of you, you might be drawn to minerals or even the color red as it relates to food. So just with learning and just looking at people's retention and growth and healing, picking one small thing and kind of connecting into it with true presence and centering can be much more impactful than just having like a deluge of stuff washing through you where you don't know what you're going to retain. And then this will be the final slide, the energetics of protein. So for those of you who do want to explore the energy of food, and I did a lot of this in the Rainbow Foods and Supplement course where we talked about energetics of food, because this is often overlooked in nutrition. There are many different ways to study nutrition. And one of them is what more of the traditional systems of medicine tend to study, like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine, which is to look at the elemental properties of food. The thing I've always had an issue with traditional systems is that they have a set framework of how these things fall out. However, what I have come to know is that for everybody at different times, that can be different. Yes, there are certain protein sources that are just going to naturally be heavier because they're denser. They're denser in protein. So depending on where you are in the moment, that might ground you, that might unground you. So you have to kind of feel that out for yourself. And I like to stick to 3 times of trying something out at different times and seeing what kind of an effect it had on me. Right? Again, legumes versus perhaps something more, or even use vegetables as a protein source. You can do that too, just to see how you feel. And for some people who are way too grounded, where I come from in the Midwest of the United States, there's a lot of meat and potatoes, And so it's like salt of the earth people. They even use a lot of root metaphors to describe the people that live in these places. Salt of the earth. They're rooted, they're in their ruts, they're in their habits. And so having a bit of lighter protein sources might actually serve them, especially if they need a lot of change and need some uprooting and some shifting. So what I would say here is to play with this as it relates to your own body. This is just a general guideline. This is just a general spectrum for you to work with. And you can see how different things feel. And maybe we get a thread on Facebook with, how does protein feel, different protein, and you can relay your experiences. It might be interesting to hear about that for each of you. Okay, so let's close, and I apologize for being a bit over time. And again, I just wanted to check out some things with you and did a little bit of a longer check-in. Any closing comments before we end today? Anything that anybody wants to share? No? All right. I hope you feel good about the root. I know that there's a lot here. We're not saying goodbye to the root after another 2 weeks. The root will stay with us. And in fact, I think it's a good thing that we started with the root, because probably that's where most of the healing will take place. And then we bring that into every chakra thereafter, right? And we do this layering effect, kind of like a sandwich with different layers as we go. Okay, well, thank you all for your feedback. Thank you to everybody who has checked in and provided some responses and some feedback to your peers here. And if you haven't connected with your partners, I think it's really, really important. You'll just get more out of the course if you do connect with your partners. It'll be much more enriching. You'll have some greater in-depth dialogue on your own experiences. So if you haven't done that yet, and if you need our help, please email us so that we can get you connected. I know that we just had, we're having 2 more people join us. So there might be some options for other partners. And if not, we might need to connect you into an existing duo to make a trio. And that's okay too. Okay? All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And our next webinar will be in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today at 2 p.m. Pacific. So we will be starting the flow at that point. So let's have fun with the root. Thanks so much, everybody, for showing up, being present. Take care. Bye.